Which players should you be looking to stash off the waiver wire right now heading into week 10? Let's find out. Welcome back, Endgame community. I'm Pierre, here to help you once again with some waiver wire options looking ahead beyond this week, guys, that might have some value that you want to grab before that happens. So let's start. Finally, I'm just going to break down and talk about Odell Beckham Jr. Now, a lot of people have asked, do I pick him up now? Do I stash him? I've been saying no, right? Just no, not worth it. We don't know if he's going to play, where he's going to play, how's he going to look. So things have changed, at least in terms of our perception, because no, he's still not with a team, but he was officially cleared to play. And that was the big thing for me, is he even going to take the field? And if so, at what level? Apparently, he's just 100% good to go, no limitations. So that's a huge step. If he can sign with the team and get out there and practice and be ready to go in like a week or two, he's got value. All right, so we're looking a week or two ahead anyways. We're looking towards the fantasy playoffs. It's early enough now, week 10, that if he's with a team for a couple of weeks, he could conceivably be in a lineup during the fantasy playoffs. All right, we know what he can do. Don't have to go over his resume or why you should be interested in Odell Beckham. Let's just talk about the fact that he still doesn't have a team and we don't know where he's going to land. That's going to be a long way towards determining his fantasy value. So I will say, just have to be careful because you're going to have to keep him on the bench and you don't know how long, because again, it's going to be a period of, well, basically teams jockeying for position to try to get him, a bidding war probably for his services, and then he's going to have to get used to the team, practice, learn the playbook, unless he's one of the former team, but we'll see. Now, with Beckham, you can't put him on IR because he's not injured anymore. You're going to need to keep him just on the bench. So I only recommend this for teams where you can afford to keep that bench space occupied for a while. But the upside could definitely be worth it. Right now, the teams that he personally kind of name dropped and said that he might, be in contact with: Buffalo, Green Bay, the Cowboys, the Giants, and possibly his former team, the Rams. Now, out of all those, I think it's pretty obvious Buffalo will be the first choice. If that happens, man, oh man, there will be a bidding war in fantasy leagues for Odell Beckham. You don't want to get into that. That's why you stash him. The Cowboys is a little more convoluted because they do have a lot of quality out there in terms of receivers like CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup, got a tight end Dalton Schultz. It's more balanced offense. So that would be a little trickier, but I could see him ending up there. Green Bay was a strong contender. I don't even know if they would get into that. They couldn't pull off a trade for a receiver before the deadline. Aaron Rodgers just looks done, and they're not looking like a playoff contender. It would be maybe kind of a last grasp, a desperation play for them to try to get him to make the playoffs. But I don't even know if I would like him in Green Bay. Giants, Odell Beckham in New York again, sounds great, but Daniel Jones at quarterback, not so great. This would definitely depress his value because the volume wouldn't be there. And then obviously the Rams, I think, would be my least favorite fit for him because that offensive line is just terrible. Allen Robinson hasn't done anything there. Van Jefferson hasn't done. Nobody has done anything in that offense except for Cooper Kupp. I don't see why Beckham being there would all of a sudden change things. So depending on where he goes, obviously his value will fluctuate. But either way, again, if you have the room and you need the upside at receiver, and who doesn't, this might be the time to grab Odell Beckham before we hear about where he's going to sign. Now, I did mention the Cowboys, and they are a potential fit for Beckham, but what if they don't get him? Well, they are getting back James Washington, and that could lead to them depending on him a little bit more. Now, I know Gallup is back and healthy, and he's playing, and he's been okay. CeeDee Lamb, of course, is a stud. They still need some more options there at third receiver. Noah Brown has been pretty good. He's been banged up lately, though. You can never have too many weapons. So what James Washington can bring is that field stretcher, that really downfield option that, well, Gallup at one time was, but let's face it, he's still coming off the ACL. He's not going to be back to his previous levels of explosiveness, and he hasn't been used as a downfield threat, I think, for that reason. This is a guy who averages 14.3 yards per catch for his career. That number really could be higher. We've seen his average depth of target, ADOT, drop over the last couple of years of his career because he was in Pittsburgh, stuck with Big Ben, who, let's face it, by his last year, kind of had a noodle arm, and he wasn't throwing it deep anyways. And Washington just kind of got phased out as they had younger receivers. But anyways, Washington can still do that. Now, obviously, he's coming off injury himself, but once he's cleared, he'll be good to go. He's not a guy that will get a ton of volume, but he's also not a guy who needs a ton of volume. He can be one of those boom bust types that you can throw into a flex spot if you need him. So James Washington, still not cleared, still not, ready to go, a couple of weeks away. So I'm looking ahead, but again, deeper leagues, this is a guy that you could be interested in. Now, you don't have to be in too deep a league to be interested in Treylon Burks. Very talented rookie. Started to come on, and then, of course, injury struck. So he's been sidelined for the last few weeks. It looks like he's ready. I can't say for sure what will happen in week 10 because, again, they just opened a window of activation where he can start getting back to practice, being ready. We don't know if he's there yet physically, but Mike Vrabel said that's the only thing. They're excited. He's excited for him to come back and contribute, and he should be because they've got nobody else to throw to. I mean, honestly, Robert Woods just looks like a shell of his former self. I think injury and age, a combination have caught up with him. Vrabel said something the other day about just not having any targets or anybody to throw to. I kind of a little shot there at guys like Woods and Westbrook-Ikhine who've been there, but are just doing nothing. Now, to some extent, you can say, well, yeah, they've had Malik Willis at quarterback the last 2 weeks. That ain't the only problem there. Okay, this whole season, the Titans have barely thrown, and I don't think it's just because Derrick Henry's so good, and it's just because Ryan Tannehill isn't great. It's because they really don't trust the weapons out there. They've only got 1,090 passing yards on the season. There are a lot of teams that are more than double that. That is second to last in the league. So, look, Burks is set to come back. He's going to get targeted when he's on the field again. Ryan Tannehill, either this week or next week, will be back. It's not great, right? I'm not saying I love Ryan Tannehill for receivers, but it's better than Malik Willis in terms of that. And he's going to throw the ball at least enough to make a receiver fantasy viable. So Burks is a guy who, again, is so talented. Once he's good to go and he's out there, I think he will be the number one receiver on this team. So definitely worth stashing for when he does return. Let's talk tight end. Here's a guy who might have surprising value, and for those who drafted, unfortunately, Darren Waller, you might just want to consider making this switch now. And taking his place on the field, we've already seen, is Foster Moreau. So Moreau, you might not even realize this, has gotten 19 targets over the past 3 weeks. This is somebody who is a pass-catching tight end, but he can also block. He'll stay on the field for a lot of the snaps there, and he's somebody who they'll depend on because, let's face it, you know what? The Raiders are going to still have to pass a lot because their defense is that bad. Foster Moreau is somebody who does have some touchdown upside, just like Waller has had. I know Devontae Adams cuts into that, but look, you've seen Moreau be somewhat productive, and in this offense, he'll get enough target to make himself fantasy relevant. So Darren Waller owners, I suggest doing yourself a favor. Cut loose now. If you don't have a high-end option out there in waivers, like a Greg Dulcich or a Cade Otton or one of those other exciting rookies, you know what? Foster Moreau might not be so bad. And then let's end with this. Hypothetical to be sure, but look, things happen, and let's talk about the Tampa Bay running back situation. No, I'm not going to talk about Rachaad White again. I know some of you say you're sick of hearing about Rachaad White each and every week, and now you might be seeing why we've been talking about Rachaad all season. But anyways, regardless of whether he takes over or what happens, let's talk about Lenny. All right, so Leonard Fournette is not too happy. You know what? This is not the first time Leonard Fournette has been unhappy. This is a guy who in the past has been suspended. This is a guy who's been benched. And not just in Jacksonville, but also in Tampa last season. You remember, a lot of times people thought that he wasn't even going to last in Tampa. So people were surprised he was re-signed. But here he is. Everything seemed great. And now it's not great. He's been bad. Lowest rushing average in the league, 3.3 yards per carry. You can blame the offensive line partly. Of course you can. But I think Lenny definitely needs to shoulder some of the blame here. So we're going to see more Rachaad White. But what if Leonard Fournette does Leonard Fournette things and he just goes full meltdown? What if he does get benched permanently? What if he decides, I'm done with this, I don't want to be here anymore? We don't have Bruce Arians on the sideline there anymore to calm him down. Okay, Tom Brady, I'm not sure that he's in the place where he's going to be doing his best to try to make Leonard Fournette feel better. So if something happens, or injuries happen too, and we don't have Leonard Fournette in Tampa Bay anymore, yeah, Rachaad White's the lead runner. Who's the backup? Who's the number 2 guy? Who's going to split time with him? It's another third-round pick of theirs from a couple of years ago, and that's Keyshawn Vaughn. You might remember there was a time where people loved Keyshawn Vaughn because he was a Tampa Bay running back and thought that he was the future. It hasn't happened, but look, they kept him. He's still there for a reason. They could have let him go, and they haven't. So this is somebody, a talented player. Maybe he finally will get his opportunity. And I get it. The running game has been bad, and the offensive line, all those issues. But you're talking about a guy who is then a number 2 running back on an NFL team, which is still a pretty good team, Tampa Bay, and somebody who has upside. So in a world where Leonard Fournette maybe goes back to being a malcontent and something goes on with him, Keyshawn Vaughn looks like somebody who will have some waiver wire value. It's got to be a deep league, or if you're maybe Leonard Fournette owner and Rachaad White's not out there, you know what? Go deep. Take a shot on Keyshawn Vaughn. All right, those are my recommendations for early waiver wire picks to get ahead of the game. We're always trying to get you ahead of the game. Check out our waiver wire trade advice and start sit and so much more right here. We got our Week 10 playlist with everything you need to win in fantasy.